Pokrovsk is turning into a kind of battlefield many people still do not know how to name. A Russian soldier can sprint on a motorcycle, bounce on a quad bike, or climb out of a trench on foot. But the sky follows every meter like it already knows the ending. This is not just about one explosion. It is the feeling that escape routes have become pre-approved kill lanes. Because the moment a reconnaissance drone confirms movement, an FPV can dive in like a contract that has already been signed. What looks like simple compilation footage is actually a pattern, because the same roads, the same tree lines, and the same quick hiding tricks keep getting exposed, and the cost is paid in men, transport, and the small supplies that keep a front line alive. This story is about how Ukraine is using FPV pressure to rewrite time and space around Polsk, while Russian troops learn that speed does not matter when detection comes first. And the most unsettling question is not who has the bigger weapons, but who can hold the reconto strike rhythm longer in a sky that never blinks. For more clear reporting on real battles and modern weapons, like, share, and subscribe to World War History. The first signal around Pokrovsk is simple because exposed movement now gets punished fast. Russian troops are seen riding motorcycles, bouncing on quad bikes, and walking along frontline routes. And FPV drones chase them like a timer that started before they even knew. A rider can try to zigzag, cut behind a tree line, or drop into a shallow ditch, but the drone keeps the angle and closes the distance. On foot, the problem is worse because a single body in open ground becomes a clear shape against grass, snow, or dark soil. That is why these clips feel brutal, because the strike is not random and the target is not a high-value tank. It is ordinary infantry doing ordinary jobs, and the sky turns that routine into a test that most people fail. In this kind of fight, the real threat is not only the blast, but the fact that the attacker controls the moment of contact. That pressure is the start of a bigger pattern, and it explains why the tools on the ground are changing. Cheap speed is showing up everywhere for a reason, and that reason is fear. That leads directly to the next layer, which is why motorcycles and ATVs appear so often. Armor is easier to spot and easier to target now, so forces reach for vehicles that are fast, small, and easy to lose. A motorcycle costs less than an armored carrier. It burns less fuel, and it can slip through gaps where a BMP would get stuck. A quad bike can haul water, ammo, and basic gear, and it can also move a small assault team in one short burst. This looks like improvisation, but it is also adaptation, because both sides have learned that heavy platforms draw attention first. Our USI points to a hard number behind this shift because a recent study estimates drones are linked to about 60 to 70% of damaged or destroyed Russian military systems. When a battlefield produces that ratio, it forces new habits, and it makes expendable mobility feel like the only option left. The gamble is clear, because a cheap ride can still reach the line even if it never comes back. But that same logic creates a new weakness, because repeated use builds a trail the air can read. And once that trail forms, it becomes less about courage and more about probability. That probability grows when routes turn into routines, and routines turn into targets. A frontline road is not just asphalt or dirt, because it becomes a data line for drones. One trip reveals timing, spacing, and direction, and a second trip confirms it even if the rider changes speed. Recon drones do not need to strike at the first sight, because they can watch, mark, and hand off the track to an FPV team later. That is why a lone soldier moving east on a familiar lane can be found again, even after he slips out of a trench and disappears for a minute. The danger is highest when movement is steady, because steady motion is easier to predict than a short burst. This is where morale gets hit because troops start to feel that even safe minutes are being measured by someone else. It also breaks planning because commanders cannot rely on normal delivery times when every engine sound can call a drone. So the attack is not only physical because it also squeezes decision-making at the small unit level. And when small units freeze, the whole front starts to slow without a major assault. That is the bridge into the deeper story, because pressure on people quickly becomes pressure on supply. In Pokers, the chase scenes are not just spectacle because they show how a drone system attacks the human part of logistics. A motorcycle run might carry ammo, batteries, food, or a radio, and losing it can leave a trench blind or silent for hours. A quad bike might be the only way to move gear through mud or broken streets, and its loss can force a unit to walk the same exposed lane instead. The result is a loop because each strike removes mobility, and the lack of mobility creates more predictable movement. That loop is why the front line feels tighter even when the map does not change much. This is also why the most important detail is not the speed of the drone, but the timing of the hunt. When the air layer sees first, the ground layer reacts late, and late reactions get punished. This sets up the next question because once daylight routes become traps, armies start leaning on hiding, night moves, and quick drop-offs. Hiding around Pokrovsk is no longer a shield because FPV teams treat camouflage as a clue, not a wall. Russian troops pull nets over quad bikes, tuck motorcycles into tree lines, and drag gear into forest pockets. But the air still finds shapes that do not belong. A net can break the outline from the ground, yet it also creates a perfect rectangle that stands out from above. A vehicle parked too neatly or too close to a track becomes a marker that tells a drone where to stare. When the sky is patient, the question is not whether something is hidden, but whether it can stay hidden long enough to matter. That is why these scenes feel cold, because concealment becomes a countdown instead of protection. And once concealment fails, the strike is only the final step in a longer hunt. The transcript shows this in small, ugly details that do not look dramatic at first. One vehicle is left in the middle of a road, and that easy stop turns into a fatal mistake. Another sits under a camouflage net, yet the net is torn, and the drone does not hesitate once it sees the tear. There is also a moment where several quad bikes and a motorcycle are described as poorly hidden, which signals the same problem in a different form. Poor hiding is not only sloppy work, because it also reveals stress, fatigue, and rushed movement under pressure. When troops expect a drone at any moment, they hide fast and fast. Hiding leaves patterns. Those patterns are what the air layer reads first and the explosion comes after. So, the story is not a lucky hit, but a system that punishes small errors repeatedly. The ammunition cache sequence is even more revealing because it shows how FPV crews search like investigators. The pilot receives a tip that ammo is somewhere in a forest, but he does not know the exact spot, so the drone moves slowly, checks meter by meter, and treats each shadow like a question. Then a net appears and the drone goes straight to it, because a net is often the only sign humans leave behind. This is the key shift, because modern drone work is not only speed, it is also method. The air can scan, pause, turn back, and recheck, and that makes hiding inside trees less safe than it looks. Once the location is confirmed, a second drone can arrive calmly and finish the job, which turns one discovery into a repeatable process. That same logic applies to small guns and gear that were hidden well until the drone proves they were not. And when this process becomes routine, the forest stops being covered and starts being a searchable archive. This is where the target types must be separated, because not every strike has the same meaning. Soft targets are the exposed soldiers, the motorcycles, and the quad bikes, and these hits drain manpower and shock units. But line-feeding targets are the ammo stacks, the fuel, the trucks, and the stash points. And those hits drain endurance. A front line can replace a lost bike, and it can even replace a few men over time, but it struggles when small resupply nodes keep vanishing. When caches get burned, rifles go quiet sooner, batteries run out faster, and even simple tasks become riskier. That is why FPV pressure is not only tactical violence, but also a slow squeeze on the flow that keeps positions alive. And when supply begins to thin, the fear of moving alone grows even stronger, which is exactly where this story is heading. Solitary movement around Pokrovsk has become a psychological trap because a single person in open space is now a clean target for the sky. A Russian soldier crosses a field, follows a rail line, or hugs a forest edge, and the route feels quiet until the sound arrives. The drone does not need a crowd because one figure is enough to start a chase. In these clips, the danger grows in seconds since the pilot can swing wide, correct the angle, and close without warning. A man can sprint, drop flat, or crawl into rough grass. Yet, the gap keeps shrinking. Even the safe parts of terrain turn hostile because the open ground offers no place to break visual contact. That pressure hits hardest when someone moves alone because there is no partner to scan the air or call out the threat. So the body starts to move like it is being watched even before the drone is seen. This is how fear spreads through a unit because every short walk starts to feel like a last walk. And that fear becomes sharper when the season removes what little cover used to exist. Winter makes this even worse because the roadside tree lines that look protective on a map can become useless in real life. Euromaidan Press describes the start of winter as a problem for Russian efforts, since tree lines along roads provide little concealment and snowfall makes even small vehicles easier for drone operators to detect. Snow and pale ground change contrast, so motion stands out instead of blending in. Tracks become visible longer, and disturbed edges look like fresh signals from above. A person stepping out of a line of trees can be seen earlier because the background is cleaner and the shadows are simpler. That means the decision window collapses since there is less time to adjust the route once the drone is already in view. This also changes behavior because troops hesitate near openings and bunch up at the wrong moments. When the only cover is a thin strip of branches, the mind starts to treat every gap as a threat. So, winter does not only slow vehicles, it also exposes patterns that were hidden in other seasons. And once patterns are exposed, even a cautious walk can look loud to a camera in the air. The cruel part is how the mind is pulled in two directions at the same time. A soldier in this zone watches the ground for mines because one bad step can end everything. But the real danger may be above, and that split attention is a losing deal. Eyes drop to the feet, ears search for a buzz, and the brain tries to do both jobs at once. When the sound finally registers, the body reacts fast. Yet the reaction is often wrong for the new threat. Running to a trench feels like instinct, but a trench is not insurance if the drone already has the line. Freezing can also feel safe for a second, but stillness only helps if the pilot loses track, and that is not guaranteed. This is why the pressure is so heavy, because there is no single correct move that always works. Every choice has a cost, and hesitation is a cost too. So survival starts to depend on timing and luck, not just training and discipline. That is how a drone war turns ordinary movement into a mental grind. Over time, the psychological weight starts to shape tactics on the ground. Units try to reduce signatures so people move in smaller elements or even alone to avoid creating a big, obvious group. This is why the clips are not just about casualties, because they show how air pressure can bend human behavior. And once daytime crossings feel like a trap, darkness starts to look like the only door left. Night around Pokrovsk is no longer a curtain because drones turn darkness into a working shift. In several clips, FPV teams hit troop carriers and requisition civilian cars while soldiers are still inside, so the damage lands before anyone can scatter. That timing matters because a column is weakest when it is still one shape, and one strike can freeze the rest with fire and panic. Reuters described a Russian push that mixed armored vehicles, cars, and motorcycles, and Ukraine said drone strikes helped repel it in the Pokrovsk area. This changes the rule because night used to help movement, but now it can speed up destruction. And once night movement feels unsafe, commanders start gambling on speed instead of cover. Euromaidan Press reports geolocated footage where an entire Russian column was burning about 1 kilometer from its staging area, which suggests Ukrainian drones were positioned along the route. In that account, the toll is described as 10 vehicles destroyed and 40 soldiers lost in a single failed attempt, and the survivors, who tried to move on foot, were still hit. A short distance can be deadly because night roads are predictable, and predictable paths are easy to pre-watch. A drone does not need to see the route. It only needs the moment a vehicle crosses a choke point. When the lead vehicle is struck, the rest hesitate, and hesitation turns motion into a target set. So the strike is not only a blast, it is also a trap that forces a pause under a sky that keeps working. That trap connects to the second feature in these clips, which is the push to erase armored vehicles completely. FPV strikes on BMPs show a different goal because some targets are hit even when they look abandoned or already damaged. The message is denial because a damaged BMP is not gone if it can be recovered, repaired, and returned. The transcript describes a BMP spotted behind a column, and leaving it was treated as unacceptable. So additional drones were launched later to neutralize it. This kind of cleanup drains time, yet it prevents a quick workshop fix from turning yesterday's wreck into tomorrow's threat. It also pressures recovery crews because towing and repair now must happen under the same drone risk as frontline movement. When recovery becomes a combat task, maintenance slows, spare parts drain, and the front weakens, even if inventory looks large. That is why these BMP hits matter beyond one frame, because they target the repair cycle, not only the battlefield moment. Put together, night strikes on transport and denial, strikes on armor squeeze logistics from both ends. If troop drops are hit before dismount and damaged vehicles are finished before recovery, then the safe window for movement shrinks from hours to minutes. That forces smaller dispersal, more walking, and more short runs, which increases fatigue and harms coordination without a big set-piece battle. It also creates political pressure because leaders must explain why costly pushes fail so close to their starting points. The final clue is the control room footage because timing like this points to trained crews working as a system. That is the bridge to the next layer where the people behind the drone screen become as important as the drone itself. The control room footage matters because it shows FPV warfare is run like a disciplined system, not a lucky stunt. A pilot is not only flying fast because he is receiving tips, checking angles, and confirming targets before committing. That is why many strikes look calm on screen, because the hunt started earlier than the final dive. Recon drones search, mark routes, and hold attention, and FPV teams arrive when timing is worst for the target. This kind of teamwork takes training because one mistake can waste the drone and expose the launch point. It also takes routine because crews must repeat the same steps under stress and still stay precise. That crew system is the real weapon. and it is built to keep pressure constant around Pokrovsk. FPV drones have become a key tool in that pressure because they hit infantry and the small lifelines that keep positions running. Recent reporting from the area has described Russian attempts to push with groups on motorcycles and quad bikes, and drones are used to break those bursts before they reach cover. Small vehicles are chosen for speed, low cost, and narrow paths. But speed does not help when detection happens first. Once a raid is spotted, a defender can stagger strikes, force riders to scatter, and then pick off stragglers with no protection. Even when a unit survives, it may lose bikes, radios, ammo, and time, and that loss slows the next attempt. This connects to the operational map, because Pokrovsk is not only a frontline name, it is a supply hub and a road network. Russia has tried to bend the line by pushing around strong points and threatening routes, while Ukrainian defenders lean on tight surveillance and swarm-style strikes to punish movement. When roads become watch spaces, logistics shrinks because resupply turns into short, risky trips that can be stopped one by one. A destroyed bike can mean no batteries, no water, and no quick evacuation, even if the trench still holds for the day. A burned cache can silence a position without any close assault because the front line runs on small flows that add up. So the bigger story is about rhythm, because whoever keeps the recon to strike chain running longer can drain the other side without taking huge ground. That is why the next phase will revolve around breaking that chain, not just surviving the next hit. Pokrovsk is sending one clear message because modern combat is now measured by control of movement, not by quick map gains. When FPV drones are tied to reconnaissance and coordinated control, the front line turns into a stop-and-start contest where the side under pressure is forced to pause, reroute, and abandon equipment. The most dangerous part for infantry is not one big assault because it is the repeated rhythm of threat that wears down focus and drains supplies before the main fight even begins. But this story is not locked. If Russia improves dispersion, uses smarter decoys, and raises electronic warfare, the sky may blur at key moments and fast runs on motorcycles or ATVs could regain short-term value. If Ukraine keeps drone density, trained crews, and steady resupply of systems, then Pokrovsk could become the model for a war where moving is the same as signing a risk. So, the open question stays sharp. Who breaks the recon to strike chain first? And who turns it into the new normal? If you want more clear reporting on real battles and modern weapons, like, share, and subscribe to World War History.